take you back to Davos, Switzerland now, and it is day 3 of the 54th World Economic Forum taking place in that part of the world. And generative artificial intelligence is one of the key topics on the agenda. Let's touch base with our business editor, Xolani Mbanjwa, who joins us live now from the ski resort. And Mr. Mbanjwa, good morning to you. AI, why is it such a firm topic of discussion there this time around?
Well, good morning, Oli. We've seen that generative artificial intelligence has made its way to the WEF Global Risks Report for the year 2024. And they're saying that AI, as we've seen ChatGPT and other forms of AI coming up to the prominence since last year, there is a lot of risk that's coming out that could lead to disinformation and misinformation. In fact, there are discussions here about possibly making every form of AI have a watermark so that you can identify material or actually content that has been created by AI and content that has been created by human beings, so that you can differentiate between the two. But African AI is also quite important. We know that around the world there are many millions of developers around the world, but on the African continent there are under 800,000 developers for the whole continent. So there's a lot of work that needs to be done. But I'm joined this morning by Pretoria born and raised Professor Bukosi Maribate, who is the Associate Professor at the University of Pretoria, where he is also the computer science guru there. And here this year he is the WEF Global Leader, chosen among the youngest bright minds around the world. Professor Bukosi, thank you very much for your time this morning. Let's talk about generative AI coming out of the African continent. What are we doing? What exciting developments are coming out of the continent?
Yeah, thanks for having me. So on my side, I work as an academic. I'm the chair of data science, as you said, at the University of Pretoria. On the other hand, I also am a co-founder of an AI research startup called Lelapa AI that works to also make sure that these technologies get into people's hands. So when thinking about AI on the African continent, one is that there is research that is being done. We need to scale it up. We need more people within this area. But it really talks to our geographic, cultural requirements that are very different than being here. And an example is that if we think about these models that are using text for generation, just imagine now that they might give you some information that is talking about snow. But now if you create some idiom about snow and you try to give it to an African child, the context is lost.
Yes.
Right? And in the same way, there are things that we talk about in our communities that you use that cultural, geographic references because people understand them. We have a joint understanding that somebody here who's in Davos wouldn't understand. Right? It's not just simply the words, but it's these things that go in these systems. So the developments on the continent have been many. There's been a large growing community across the continent, and then also in South Africa. So some of the things that we do, for example, at the university is study African languages, build models for African languages, especially these precursors. So being able to collect the data, collecting speech, collecting text in our languages so that we can build these models. And this thing is very important to do it because it also allows us to preserve the languages, right? There will be a time, I tend to say, that if a machine doesn't understand your language or can't process your language, it's almost like it never existed. In the sense.
Yes.
Yes. Well, at Lelapa, what we're also doing there is now saying, how do we make sure that these speech transcription services or processing systems, translation models for our languages in South Africa and beyond, and other things like sentiment analysis become available to other organizations and for them to be able to use.
So you have been attending a number of engagements here at the World Economic Forum. You are a WEF global leader. what's your perceptions about the representation of African developers and African AI, if I can call it that, here in Davos, where the world's global elite are actually meeting?
Yeah, so yes, I was privileged to be included in the WEF Young Global Leaders of 2023 as one of the South Africans, and I've been coming now to a number of these meetings. It's my first time in Davos, but there are other WEF meetings, and we really need to find ways that the African continent is represented here. It's not that there's nothing that is going on. I traveled the continent. I've been in Ghana last year for one of our large meetings called the Deep Learning Endowment with 800 plus researchers who work in these spaces. And there's so much that we can learn from the African continent in the same way we can learn from some of the developments that are being shown here. So that is one part of saying that we don't just want, like, a seat at the table as per se, but we have to then be active. And I think we can be very active. The grassroots movements on the continent have done wonders in building up the skills that are required for the continent. There are many, many startups now that are starting to come out of the African continent, and we really want them to try out as many of these things as possible. So just think, if we're thinking about education, how we can now enable more mother tongue interactions in education, in health, for people to being able to search for information and also be able to tell you what ails them in their languages, right? Or being able to speak, we do these voice notes. At the end of the day, you might want to do a voice note in isiZulu, get it actually extracting the text for you, and then you being able to send it out. We then tend to just move only into a monolingual kind of world, while we know that we lose information by doing that. So those are some of the things that I'm here. The reason I applied to come to Davos is to interact with some of the best in the world and learn from them, also teach them about some of the things that we're doing on the continent.
Professor Bukosi, a very scary scenario, or a report, if I may say, came out of the IMF earlier this week on Monday, warning that AI will actually disrupt 40% of jobs globally within the next couple of decades. If you are not using AI in your job, somebody is going to take it. AI is going to take your job, or somebody who can use AI is going to take your job. You are a Pretoria born and raised. Do you think there is some level of truth to that statistic that in probably 2050, as they said, we might see AI taking 40% of jobs globally?
So there's both opportunities and challenges in this area. I think one, I'll take you back to the risks report. A lot of systems that we use online have these things of trying to filter out bad content, right? So it might be misinformation and disinformation. Those systems, where, just as an example, don't really have good language representation for African languages. So if you wanted to spread misinformation on the African continent, you just need to write in a local language, because the system wouldn't automatically filter those types of things. So there's work that needs to be done so that we can cover those types of areas. On the other side, just like we have in South Africa, we talk about the just energy transition. There is going to have to be a just transition in thinking about where AI will disrupt our local industries, right? You see that, for example, when people try to do translations, there's parts of it that at the moment you find that it's taken as being very costly to do it by humans. But it doesn't mean you forgo the human translators, because they are much better. You still have to come up with new words or identify phrases that better represent things in there. So what we need to do is think about the machine, or the human-machine collaboration that will have to happen for the next couple of years, and how we actually create new industries. And then this requires us that there has to be wide education, not just about AI, but things like computational thinking, people trying to understand how we can solve problems using computing. And then AI sits, almost as a layer on top. There's other opportunities as well, even within the public sphere or in governments, of making sure that we have good data governance. We have better ways to generate and share data across different industries, because this also unlocks other parts of the economy, right? So obviously, being, you said, youngish, I hope, and being from Harangu and in Pretoria, I also have to think we need young people to really be in our economy, because that is a big challenge that we have as a country. So how then do we prepare them for this new reality, and then give them skills that they can then thrive, not just survive, thrive within this environment as Africans.
Professor Bukosi, thank you very much for your time. Very interesting developments when it comes to AI. AI is a focal point in terms of each and every discussion and every report about where the world is going and where some of the jobs might be in the future. Back to you in studio, Polly.
Thank you very much, Xolani Mbanjwa, our business editor, live for us there at the World Economic Forum in Davos.